You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
It's another episode of the 21.5 Show. We call it the 21.5 Show, Max, because it's short for 121.5.
Thank you.
I'm hoping our listeners get that. Maybe some don't.
I think most do.
I don't know. We use that as an emergency frequency for professional pilots. Actually, it's more of a frequency to meow and talk smack and make accidental PAs.
And always monitor.
Of course. Always monitor. Like you should be always monitoring this podcast for the latest updates. You'll be rewarded today by some more insight from our friend James Onieal, the very polarizing James Onieal.
Polarizing indeed.
He's got the latest airline hiring news. We've got some stories for you. Should be a good episode. We're coming to you from my children's bedroom today. No one said podcasting was easy, Max.
Well, what happens when you schedule an interview and the house cleaners at the same time?
Yeah. Typically,
at my house.
I don't know if I said this before. I've hosted a few of these NBAA webinars, like been the moderator for them. And it's always on Friday at 11, which is when the landscapers come with the leaf blowers. And it's always like the exact same time they start blowing the leaf blower right as they're like, all right. And it's live, so there's no editing it out. So anyways, that's okay. We're going to overcome today. Someone just sent us a text before we started with that article about the A350 Cathay Pacific single pilot long haul deal.
Yeah, I read that this morning. They're testing a system to go single pilot. And I think it doesn't say it explicitly, but I think the idea is that you can operate a 2-pilot crew and send 1 pilot into rest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for a cruise situation, not from...
No more dozing for dollars.
No, looks like it's the beginning of the end. It would appear. It's going to have a system like, more automation, which I don't know how much more automation you need in cruise flight, right? But also some sort of, it alluded to a system to monitor the pilot that's there to make sure they're like.
I think like a lot of the the new cars have that where they're looking. I think the Tesla one where there's an on autopilot, it like looks at your eyes and stuff to make sure you're awake. Yeah. So I think they're definitely perfecting that technology. And God, can you imagine doing a long hauler with just maybe just taking a nap? Well, it was like the Falcon we talked about with the reclining seat in the cockpit so you could nap there.
Yep.
And just monitor 121.5.
It's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Slowly but surely.
But it doesn't matter because we're all going to be flying supersonic anyway, so we won't even need the rest, right? Like we talked about before. Hey, we got a review. You want to read
it? No, you do it.
Okay. It's from RMS Shapiro. He says, entertaining professional pilot talk. I just got into the show a few weeks ago, and now I'm listening to episodes from back in January. They pass the time on the drive to the airport. Looking forward to the horrible bidding stories episode.
We're all looking forward to it.
Yeah. And so thanks for writing the review, RMS Shapiro. Shoot us an email, info@215podcast.com, and I'll send you some swag if you give me your address. And then,
what's the latest with the Tumblr situation?
Man. I got a great post today from one of our listeners, Nikki. She posted a picture of herself in the cockpit with the cup. 3 more folks ordered them. We've only got a couple left. Vince, Neil, and Teresa, thank you so much for supporting the show. Looking forward to getting pictures of you guys on social media. I think I'm just going to post that. Do you ever watch YouTube videos of like financial stuff and the first thing they have to say is like, I'm not a financial advisor.
Yeah.
So
the disclaimer.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's tagged that. Yeah. So proud non-financial advisor. Next up, flight advice. No flight advice today, but we did get a really good one. It's anonymous and I'm not sure who submitted it, but it had to do with depression.
By definition.
But I just want to say we've got it, and we're working on getting someone with some expertise to discuss it.
It's over our head, huh?
It's way over our head. Yeah. So So hang loose. We will have something for you. We're just working on lining up the right person to help us on that one. If you have a flight advice quandary for us, you can send an email into info@215podcast.com, or we have the anonymous form on the website. You can just go there and then you can submit it. We don't even have to know who you are. Okay, on to the mailbag. But first, who's sponsoring the mailbag today?
The mailbag today is sponsored by your friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy.
Oh.
For all of your aviation education needs, whether you're Part 135, a chief pilot of a flight department, or just somebody looking to brush up on their skills, Advanced Aircrew Academy can be found at aircrewacademy.com.
That was very professional.
That's totally from the hip, too.
Yeah, I love that. Mailbag number 1. Hi, Dylan and Max. Love the podcast. Thanks for all the time you put into it and glad to make a donation to keep it going. Working my way up the ladder, just got my CFI and will need daily reminders never to take financial advice from pilots when sipping on morning coffee. That's from Neil.
Dude, that's an aggressive investment in the tumbler if you're just becoming a CFI.
Yeah, exactly.
Like $80 back then would have been serious.
I feel like that was like what I'd make in a day, maybe. Probably.
Yeah, around that. Gross.
Yeah. So, yeah. Salute to you, Neil. Hopefully you have a side hustle. Hopefully this is your second deal.
Nobody has a side hustle. Well, I guess.
Who knows? Well,
he could be at, who knows? We're relating to our situation just out of college. Which,
yeah. Next one.
All right. We got one from LinkedIn. Do you have any comments on when you have pilots that do not have permission from their employer to fly on the side and they get paid as, quote, consultants instead of pilots? It seems to get some heavy fuss sometimes. Charles.
He's referring to our contract pilot episode, first of all, which was the previous episode. I think.
But how can you sit in the right or left seat of an airplane
and say you're a consultant?
I could maybe get on board with that if you're a mentor, like if you're
the third, not a
like
required
if it's a
crew
single
member.
Pilot airplane and you're flying, with somebody to just keep an eye on things. Or as a safety, or whatever, but you're not required to be there.
Yeah, a non-required
You're essentially
crew member.
a passenger in the front.
Mm-hmm.
You could, I could maybe get on board with that scenario.
Yeah.
But if you're a required crew member, I'm not sure how you're a consultant.
Here's a simple way to approach all of these gray areas, and just imagine yourself explaining this to your chief pilot in his office. Okay. And then think how that's going to go down. No, because here's the thing that like
I said, this reminds me of one time when you acted as an unpaid consultant.
I actually do kind of remember.
So we
this.
were on this big trip in Telluride for closing weekend, which is a big party weekend. It's not really about the skiing. It's
actually it was incredible.
But
skiing
it was
weekend,
incredible. Yeah, we hiked. Remember, did a huge run, but that's besides the point. So it's the last. You have to take off that night because they're closing the runway the following morning for doing runway work, right?
Right.
So we all pile into this citation that we're all, paying our pro rate of share.
Mm-hmm.
And we had I don't remember who the pilot was, but he was wasn't the most experienced guy. All the experienced guys were in the back and we'd all been partying all day, except for you. So we're like, I'm like, maybe you should go up front. And so you would go up front, and we took off. Remember, the guy was kind of behind the airplane, and you're basically propping everything up.
No, the problem was he kept trying to file for a arrival that had been decommissioned like 3 years ago. He couldn't find it in the database. No, he goes, I can't find the Jacobs arrival. I'm like, well, it was decommissioned 3 years ago, and so that's like how it started. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to stay up here and just kind of keep an eye on things.
Because this guy, he wasn't a buddy of ours.
Yeah.
He was just...
No, he was a contract pilot.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was unpaid consulting. Yeah, that's a pretty good example.
So that was a good example because you weren't required, but you came up and you consulted so that we all stayed alive. It was great.
Lived to
we all
fight another
appreciate
day.
that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Unpaid.
But anyway.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to explain that to your chief pilot. If you are a required crew member and something goes wrong and you're like, oh, yeah, I wasn't contracting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we know the answer to this. Everybody knows the answer to this.
Yeah, I think we all know the answer to this. It's I think that's really good advice, though. Pretend you got caught and how are you going to explain this to your chief pilot or superior?
Have you ever, like, when at the airlines or a bigger operation, have you ever gotten called into a chief pilot's office for like
Discipline,
or like just to be talked to?
The only time was when we were flight instructors and I got called in by our chief flight, or my boss, whatever it was called. I don't remember the name, but he wasn't the head honcho, but he was like in charge of our little team. And he called me in, and I think it had something to do with like how I was dressing, because I was following the letter of the dress code, but
the spirit, maybe not the spirit,
not the spirit. Yeah.
I
remember.
I think you might have told this story before. I can't remember.
I don't know, but that's the only time.
It's funny because I got reprimanded for my questionable uniform adherence at Embry-Riddle as an instructor also, because they ordered these like really ugly khaki pants that didn't fit me, so then I just went and bought some that fit me right. And I think everyone else was miserable wearing them, and so I like singled myself out by wearing like regular fitting pants, and the chief pilot's like, no, we all got to be miserable together. Like, you can't.
My favorite story though of all time is Roy's about the guy. About who was it that called? No, who was it? The one that got called in because their haircut, but the guy had on like,
the
like
cowboy
black jeans and cowboy boots and not spurs, a bolo tie. Well, spurs.
I think it was a bolo tie.
Could you imagine a guy walking through the terminal with spurs on? That would be the best.
Oh, you know what? I got called into the chief pilot's office at American Eagle one time. Okay, for anyone that's flown for the airlines the first year, maybe this is more a regional thing, I don't know at the majors, but they have those sheets they give the captains on every leg of their release on your probationary, and they're supposed to like fill it out and, this guy's attention to detail and whatever, he's on time and everything. And so I had to turn some of those in, and this was every year right out of college, and then we're at the airlines. We used to have this thing in December called the holiday sweater and mustache party. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so I would grow a mustache every like November and December at the airline. This was like before, I think it's called November mustache. I can't remember what it is, but it's a big thing at the regionals now. I think you grow a mustache in November now, but this was before all that. And so I was bringing in these review things into the chief pilot, because I think you're supposed to turn a couple in per quarter or something like that. And he just looks at me and he's like, that mustache has got to go. And then I had some of the reviews that I had handed in. Some of the captains had written something too, like, terrible mustache, shave your mustache.
Really?
So it gives you an idea of
you
how
grow
bad
such
it
a strong mustache.
No, I didn't then. I'll post a picture of it maybe of the holiday sweater mustache party. But yeah, so I mean, which you can like again, like the FOM usually says you can have a mustache. But
oh yeah, trust me.
The LA chief pilot didn't think that it fit my.
I think that's the thing that a lot of guys. I've seen a lot of
questionable,
people
facial
that
hair
are fitting within the letter of the code, but. It's not the spirit.
Not the spirit. Like another one, I took this picture a long time ago. It's actually made it on the internet on a bunch of different places. I flew with a guy with black Crocs.
Oh, yeah.
That was his uniform. But it was just, like, if you're not paying that close of attention, he wore and these were
wearing black socks, right?
Black socks, black Crocs. And it was the Croc with, like, the strap in the back. But, like, if you just quickly looked, you wouldn't notice. And then he put his foot up in the airplane, and I saw it. I'm like, all right. I gotta take a picture of this.
I saw the funny thing on the internet with a guy with Crocs. Has that little heel strap, and some people wear the heel strap forward. It was like some redneck dudes, just 2-wheel drive, and then the thing down in the back 4-wheel drive.
4-wheel drive. Well, this guy was a professional. He was wearing it, in the back because I mean, we're flying 34 people around in a Saab turboprop. You got to take that seriously.
Yeah.
So. Anyways, we got off on a tangent, but that's the mailbag for today. Advanced Aircrew Academy probably regretting sponsoring that segment. If you want to write in, it's info@215podcast.com, and always happy to hear from our listeners. Keep the flow coming. Next.
Let's just get right to this. Needs no intro because it already has an
Everybody knows
intro.
who James is. We all know what he does. He ruffles people's feathers, but he has good information. I can't keep track of what's going on in the airlines right now. I mean, I just
insane. Don't understand.
Yeah.
As you'll find out, I just don't get it.
So here it is. Before that, we do want to mention our friends at Harvey Watt. Here's some flight advice for you. You need to protect yourself from a loss of medical. Here's an interesting number. More than half of all professional pilots in their career will go out on a long-term leave due to medical. Are you protected? Is your family protected? Are you going to be able to replace that income?
It's funny because I think that nobody really thinks about that until it's right about like 40-ish.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And something, we just talked to somebody the other day that got like some concrete.
Roy. Yeah, he was just telling us yesterday. We had lunch
about
with him,
like in his eye or something happens and you're like, and you realize how fragile and how quickly things can change.
That also happened when I had kids too. I think you notice kind of like, oh, don't do that. Oh, you're going to get hurt. Anyways, protect yourself, harveywatt.com. They've got life insurance. They've got insurance for loss of medical certificate. Everything a professional pilot needs, harveywatt.com. Here we go.
And now, one of my personal favorite segments, it's Industry Update with James Onieal.
They've gotten a lot more exciting since Q1 2020. Nobody wanted my industry updates last year.
Yeah.
No, it
was mostly this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, another one bites the dust.
Oh my gosh. Welcome back, James. So we can't keep track of what's going on. It's insane. I got your email just the other day from Raven talking about all the different hiring numbers. And we need you to break it down for us a little bit. There's so much going on. How are you even keeping track of what's happening out there?
I don't know if I know any more about what's going on than you do. So it's an interesting point. So we have a team of folks on the back end that keep track of all the different segments of the industry. Ultra low cost, the legacies, the regionals, corporate, the 135, so on and so forth. We have, Amy goes out and goes to all the industry events. So if there's any airline that's putting on any type of public event, Amy's there. Even up until like when they're doing, investor meetings, she's suffering through listening to 3 hours for 2 seconds or 2 minutes of good information. But I'll be honest with you, it's pretty hard because so much information is changing so rapidly. We're watching companies, announcing, hey, we're going to start hiring, in whatever 2 or 3 months. And then it's, hey, we're going to be hiring 100 a month, 150 a month, 200 a month. And you're watching those numbers come out from multiple companies at any given time. If you run those numbers out, no kidding, you're looking at somewhere around 5,000 pilots getting hired in 2022, I think it is at this point. Which, if anyone's thinking that doesn't make any sense, congratulations, because we're running the numbers on our end too. And I've pulled my shoes and my socks off. I've got all my, hands and fingers and like an advanced, TI-83 calculator out. And there's a couple of reasons that make it problematic. So the first is physically, how are they going to get them through the simulators? You can't, they need the check airmen out on the line flying, right? They need all these people out on the line flying. How are they physically going to train all of them? I'd be real curious to see if anybody's going to try and buy simulator space over in Europe. Because obviously our aviation market is recovering better than a lot of other markets. But yeah, how are you physically going to get them through the simulator? How are you going to get them through IOE? I'm not, this is a genuine question. It's not a prediction, right? But what we just crossed 2 million on the TSA numbers here. And so folks are concerned over, hey, look, is this just an initial surge because, everyone's been basically on house arrest for the past, year and a half, or is that going to sustain? It's clearly leisure travel that's doing it. A couple weeks ago saw, when they started opening everything up, started buying as many tickets as I could because the prices were so cheap, and the prices are already starting to go up.
Oh yeah.
One of our guys, I think it was Graham, talked about his informal polling shows that there are more people showing up with slacks and polos than flip flops and leggings. So which he uses as an industry metric for what the price of tickets are. But yeah, it's where are they going to get the pilots from, right? Because if they start pulling them just from their regional flow, how how are they going to move their regional jets? If you figure, let's say a legacy airline went to their regional partner and said, hey, we're only going to take captains. You have a double training event. You've got to train. You've got to take the first officer, train them as a captain to replace the existing captain. You got to bring in a new first officer to train them. And then you've got the legacy airline training for the new person coming online. So are they going to have to take people from the left and the right seat? But it's a big game of Tetris that if you take a look at it, it'd be interesting to see if they can actually hit the numbers that they're saying.
Get into some of the numbers that they're saying, just so that we kind of know from what you guys have seen.
You're talking between now, it's June, mid-June when we're recording this, right? So you're talking between now and next summer, United's saying 1,000.
And how many retirements do they have? I think that's an important number to also balance that with.
Yeah, the biggest one that I'm focusing right now on retirements is American, because it's 4,000 in the next 5 years, which is it's basically a third of their seniority list they're going to lose in 5 years. You take a look at NetJets. They just announced a couple of weeks ago, hey, we're going to hire 150 in 2021. Now they just came out and they said they want, 250 before Thanksgiving and 300 by the end of the year. If you get hired by NetJets today, you move up 10% in seniority by New Year's, is what they're saying. I mean, that's just like insane.
The world has completely gone nuts.
If you take a look at, let's say if United actually hires 1,000 people between now and next summer, right? You pair that with retirements, you're moving up in seniority pretty quick. And when you take a look at the class slots, they're putting people into the 737, into the Airbus, the 757. I mean, there's a wide array of aircraft that you can popped into. Delta's saying 150 a month until January, and then in January they're doing 200 a month. Well, that's 2,400 in a year. That's a lot of pilots.
I mean, the thing that doesn't make sense, I said it before with the long haul international stuff, that's clearly is not recovered at the rate we are here. But I listened to this podcast pretty regularly called Airlines Confidential. I actually got it from your guys' podcast. But the guy, those are smart guys. Like Ben Baldenza, he was the CEO of Spirit. This guy, Mike Cox at Seabury Capital, they advise airlines, almost every airline around the world, if they have bankruptcy, to navigate that. I mean, these guys are big deals that know a lot about the airlines. And you listen to them and they paint a very different picture about the recovery, and the economics of operating wide bodies without last minute business travel and people paying 10 grand to go to London in first class last minute. Like, those don't work very well without those travelers. And so I just don't understand. Like, I get Southwest, I get Spirit, I get Frontier. I can wrap my head around that and why those guys are with this big expansion. Southwest has launched a bunch of destinations, yada, yada, yada. But how does United or Delta or American, like, there's a lot of retirements. I get they need to backfill. Where are the rest of the people going to go? Like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of things you got to take a look at. So the first is, it takes a long time to slow a freight train down, and it takes a long time to get it back up to speed. So you don't know what percentage of the hiring are they doing with the mindset of, we need to have people trained and ready to go for when the business is there, right? Versus saying, hey, we'll wait till we definitely need it. The second part of it is they've got to be very careful, because you can start losing market share. Hubs are very, very, very expensive to start up and very, very, very easy to lose. So, you take a look at moves that Southwest is making, right? How much do you want somebody encroaching on your New York hub or your Charlotte hub or your Dallas hub or your Chicago hub? I mean, it may not be that they're necessarily worried, that Southwest is going to come in and start running, European routes on a 737 and take their international markets, right? But they can put a dent. They can put a dent in New York. They could put a dent in Chicago, or they could get a foothold that they could use to put a bigger dent in later. And so it's tough, right? I mean, they've got to make certain assumptions and they've got to make certain moves, but it's leisure travel that's driving it. It's not business travel. and nobody really knows what business travel is going to look like. I think, what was it? I don't remember what CEO it was the other day, but was talking about, hey, if you can go out to dinner in New York City, you can come to the office for work. So we're watching companies are trying to start to pull employees back into the office. Well, if they start doing that, how much business travel is going to start back up in terms of office to office travel and so on and so forth? We don't know. But the hiring numbers are pretty insane.
Yeah.
And the second question is, are they going to sustain? And look, nobody knows that. They don't.
That's so, yeah.
Well, that's why you're watching Scott Kirby right now is putting up a big stink about trying to push into the UK, right? They need those European routes opened up. Otherwise, they're sitting these wide bodies around. How many 777 flights can you do from New York to LA, right? I mean, you got to move those things further.
That will be interesting to see how that all plays out, because I've learned a lot about the economics of the wide body operation. That's scary. I mean, it's a lot, huge expense, and the economics are really tight on.
Well, we'll be going supersonic in like 3 years, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we already talked about that. Yeah, take that one to the bank.
Whoa. You think that date might slide a bit?
It might never stop sliding.
Well, I mean, I think NetJets put the Airline thing on their, on the front page of their website is their splash image when you go to the NetJets website.
FlexJet. I think it was Flex had a big order.
No, NetJets did too.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Yeah, wow. And then the company declared bankruptcy 3 weeks later.
Whoopsie.
So, I mean,
I
don't know if I'd be putting the logos on the airplanes yet.
Jeez. So, I mean, at this point, with these crazy numbers, do you get the feeling like if you've got a client you're working with, you're helping them get a job at a major, is there any consideration of go here, it's going to be safer because there's some unknown? Like you mentioned, there's a lot more retirements in American, ignoring all the other factors. Is that something worth considering? Maybe United, Delta, American, if I'm looking at one of those three with all the uncertainty, is there probably a safer spot?
Yeah. So look, you've got your known knowns, your known unknowns, and your unknown unknowns. The unknown unknowns are the ones you got to watch out for. And so, like pandemics. A lot of people right now are struggling for, hey, what's the safest option? I'll give you a really easy example. 3-4 times a day, I'll talk to somebody and, a different person, and one person will go, I'm really worried about American. I'm worried about their debt position. I don't know if they're a good company to go to, so on and so forth. The next phone call I get on is, do you know how many pilots they're retiring? Even if it goes sideways, you're still you're moving up the list so quick. So there's a lot of unknown unknowns out there, and it's very hard to pick a position and say, hey, I think this is going to be at least in the short and medium term, there might be some disruption, right? So people are mostly making long-term decisions right now, right? Yeah. Ultimately, if they get hired by American, or they get hired by Delta, or they get hired by United, or they get hired by Spirit, or they get hired by Frontier, or they get hired by Southwest, they're making a bet that, hey, long-term, when this all averages out, everything's going to be okay. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be a hiccup in the fall where you just stagnate on the bottom of a seniority list for a little bit while and you end up on reserve or something like that. I don't know. But that is why the networking is so important, because you're constantly pulling in information and you're trying to find out what moves do I need to be making. I talked to a guy this morning, and we were, actually over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about doing some interview prep for a pretty major Part 91 operator. And I got a text message from him this morning that said, hey, I really need to reorganize my plan. He had a job flying a corporate jet and the owner died. Owner's under 60. And the family went, yeah, we're chucking the jet. That was it. He's out of work. So his plan changes. There's all these things that can happen that you just can't predict. And so at least if you have that information, right? And you're keeping your kind of fingers throughout the industry. If you have a momentary disruption, short or medium term, you can do something to keep the income coming in so that long term it all averages itself out. If you get on with, like I said, Delta, United, Southwest American, Spirit, Frontier, the bet is it's going to be okay. It doesn't mean you might not be spending a year or two out on the streets. You just have to survive that year or two.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pilots that are getting certified as real estate agents right now and home inspectors. So, you know.
As we mentioned in the last episode, getting the certificate or the license is the easy part.
Yeah. Which, hey, by the way, if you do have a home inspector certificate, I'd love to hear from you on how that's going, because there's a boatload of people buying without home inspections right now. I'm curious how that affected their side gig.
That's for another day.
Get appointments, so they're still doing it.
All right. So, James, on this very podcast, not that long ago, we did an entire episode where we talked about, wait a minute, should I be going to a low-cost carrier instead of the majors? Like, should that be on my radar? I mean, should we go back and just delete that episode? Is that still valid? Like, are people still thinking that? What's your opinion on the low-cost carrier stuff as a career destination?
Yeah, so it's funny. Still such a polarizing topic, because for the folks... There are some folks that went through this, and this really dumped gasoline on the fire of them wanting to go to an ultra low cost, because their mentality is like, hey, look, this was a bloodbath, and they were in a really, really, really good position to handle this. And other folks, you know, it's kind of solidified, hey, look, I don't want to go anywhere near that. I want to go to a legacy airline with a larger seniority list, so on and so forth. Look, I mean, you're depending on where you live and what your career goals are, you could be living in base, flying an Airbus for anywhere between, let's call it $150,000 and $400,000 a year, depending on how hard you want to work. With a pretty stable business model. Yeah. Are you going to go fly to Shanghai in an A321 XLR? No, you won't. Right. But you know, you'll have a job. And I think a lot of folks have recognized that, you know, that obviously is a good thing. But it ultimately really does boil down to what your career goals are. Look, I mean, if you really want to fly a 75, 76, 777, you really want to be an international captain, then Spirit or Frontier, that's not going to work for you. If your kind of mentality is, hey, look, quality of life, you know, I believe in the model, because you really do have to believe in the model. You really have to believe in the ultra low cost and the idea that, hey, look, we're going to strip everything bare. My parents went on a vacation this past week to the Carolinas, and they flew Spirit. And I text, they've never flown an ultra low cost in their lives. And so I texted my mother. I said, hey, how'd you like the trip? And she goes, they nickel and dime me for everything. I thought they were going to charge me for the air I'm breathing. You know, wasn't for them. They're never going to get on there again. Right. But for the people that know what the ultra low cost model is as passengers, that's it. They're not looking anyplace else. They're going to use that to go to Florida to get on a cruise. They're going to use it to go to Arizona or Mexico or South America, or, you know, depending on where they're going. It's a pretty stable model that's pretty flexible.
Max, I've got some rapid fire questions written down here. You want to feed one to James?
So if I'm a corporate pilot and I have the minimums to qualify to a direct entry captain program at like somewhere like Commute Air, is that something I should do? Or if you're stuck in one of the flow programs, is that something should you jump ship and go there to get that direct, or to that turbine PIC 121 set up?
Yeah, we get this like 50 times a day. So the ultimate underlying concern of this is like, look, I'm watching people pass me. They're getting hired by United. They're getting hired by Delta. They're getting hired by American, right? Or technically not American yet, because they haven't started their hiring until September. And the overall mentality is, hey, look, I'm watching these people pass me by. Should I just take the bite, take the short-term loss, go get that turbine PIC time so I can get that job? Here's what you got to ask yourself. How much do you think that turbine PIC time is going to make a difference for you? And there's a couple different things with that. If you have no PIC time or very little PIC time, right? Yeah. And you have a lot of volunteer experience and a lot of outside the cockpit experience and so on and so forth, then yeah, that turbine PIC time may be worth it for you. But if you've got like no experience in training or safety or volunteering or anything outside the cockpit, and you think, hey, you're just going to go jump from being an FO to a captain at a regional, and that's all of a sudden going to make your application pop to the top, it's just not going to happen. The other problem is that it could lead to a really substantial commute and a really substantial pay cut for them to do that. And the reality is, when we go through the coaching sessions with folks on this, it's a little deeper than, hey, how's that 1,000 hours of turbine PIC time going to help you? Because it could take you 2 to 3 years to get it. And it's really more about, can your family sustain that 2 to 3 years? And what if you hit a hiccup and it takes you 4 or 5? For some people, the answer is, hey, look, I'm fine with that. Let's go do it. But for other people, if you're commuting halfway across the country, and every time they hire a new first officer, that person, or I'm sorry, every time they upgrade an existing first officer, you move down the list of captain, which means you could potentially perpetually be on reserve.
Yes. This is exactly what happened to our friend who did this.
You got to think about it this way, right? You lose 50% of your net worth when you get divorced. So, I mean, it's that can be a really expensive decision to make.
Connecting a lot of dots there, James.
Well, I guess it's 50% of your net worth plus attorney's fees for both you and your partner. The point is, it's not the 1,000 hours is not a magical number that everyone makes it out to be. And if you want to prove it, go take a look at all the regional captains that have 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 hours of turbine PIC time. They're still regional captains. There is a certain percentage of maybe 10 or 15% that want to be regional captains for the rest of their lives, right? Because they're in base, they have good quality of life, their spouse works, makes a good income, and that's what they want to do with their lives. But that's a very, very, very small percentage. The rest of them have 2,000 or 3,000 hours of PIC time, and they're banging their head against the wall going, how do I get out of here? It's not like you hit 1,000 hours of turbine PIC time and all of a sudden the airlines come calling and go, hey, we're ready for you. It's that outside the cockpit experience. It's the networking. It's the letters of recommendation. There's a lot of different components that go into this that get you to the top of that pile and get you the job. 1,000 PIC or turbine PIC time is a portion of it, but we got a lot of people getting hired by United right now, 200, 300 hours turbine PIC time, no turbine PIC time. It's just not as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
Okay, next one. I'm a well-qualified regional captain. Can I afford to be choosy on which major I go to? I've got one in mind, Delta, that I really want above the rest. If I have an interview at another major, should the mindset of take the first major that calls and go there, or should I hold out for the one that I want right now in this current environment?
Yeah, so that's always a real interesting question. So culturally speaking, when you take a look at American, Delta, and United, just the 3 legacy carriers, right? They're very culturally different, right? When we throw in Southwest, Spirit, and Frontier, that even gets more complicated in terms of being culturally different. There is a difference between saying, should I go to the interview and should I take the job? I think Max is probably going to agree with me on this one, right? You go to the interview, man. You lose nothing by going out on a first date. You never know. You might show up and actually like the place. You might actually like the people. I can't tell you how many times you have somebody go into an interview with a company thinking they're going to use it as practice, and they get into the interview and they go, wow, that was actually a lot different than I thought. They get offered a job and they take it and they stay there and they're happy. Okay, so that's number one. Go to the interview. Give them a chance. Don't turn down the opportunity to have them impress you and potentially take a job at a company you're going to like. Number two, you got to answer for yourself as to whether or not you and your family can sustain turning down a job. I mean, if you live in Atlanta and you're going to get United 7-3FO in San Francisco, once again, it's a legacy job. It's a great company, but it may not be right for your family. You've really got to think through what is driving your decision. If you want to be a wide-body international captain, then yeah, United may be the place that's right for you, right? But if you want to be home-based in Dallas, right, Spirit or American is probably the place you want to look at. It just depends on what is driving the decision. And it's usually going to be a little bit more complicated than just, hey, take the first one that comes your way.
I got a question. What if they say, I'll take the job, but if Delta calls and I get the job, I'm going to leave in training?
Well, it does happen. There's pilots leaving United right now. Just as an example. We've actually had a number of clients get hired at multiple airlines and find out while they were in training, and they got the one that they wanted and they left training to go to that one. It does happen. But you're better suited to make that decision when it pops into your lap than pre-thinking it through, because you don't know what the market situation is going to look like. You don't know what the company is going to look like, and you don't know what the hiring is going to look like. It could be a really smart deal to leave the one that you're at for the one that you want to go to while you're in training, because the numbers just favor better. You're going to get the base you want or the aircraft you want or so on and so forth. And it might not. But spending time now thinking about whether or not you would, if Miss America or Miss Universe asked you out on a date, which one would you take first? Well, neither of them are. So don't worry about thinking about it, right?
Just worry about getting their number first.
Yeah. Let's wait till that happens, and then you know what I'm saying? But it's literally like thinking through that question, right? We can pregame this to death and run ourselves in circles, but it's just a lot easier to put 100% effort into getting hired by any of the airlines that you would realistically consider, right? So, for example, if you know there's absolutely no circumstance that you would ever, under any condition, go to United, then yeah, don't waste any effort doing that, right? But if you realistically know you would honestly consider Spirit, you would honestly consider American, and you would honestly consider United, then you should run at those at 100 miles an hour. And then when the opportunity pops into your lap, if you have multiples, then yeah, we can field that offer, and it's typically a much shorter conversation to make the decision when the opportunities are on the table than when it is when you're trying to pregame and think through all the different ways this can go right or wrong, and you're just wasting energy on something that's not happening.
Okay, last one. I'm a 1,500-hour CFI, and all of a sudden, I'm getting lots of interest from the regionals. My ultimate goal is to get to the majors as soon as possible, and I don't care about where I live or what I fly. What should I do?
You should go to the company with the worst work rules on the face of the earth. You want to, look, ultimately, it is easier to take the bite earlier on in your career when you don't have children, you're not married, you don't own a house, you don't own a car. Ideally, if you have any debt, the only debt that you have is your student loan debt, right? Because you can afford to take additional flying and additional responsibilities outside the cockpit and do all these things that the further you get into your career, the harder they become, because you eventually have other commitments, right? Family, you've children, you've, like I said, debt, so on and so forth. And so if you're a 1,500-hour CFI and you have the opportunity to really do anything you want without limitation, you should go to the company with the worst work rules on the face of the earth, because two things are going to happen. You're going to fly a boatload, and you're going to upgrade quick because everybody's trying to leave. I mean, why do you think I went to Colgan? It was not for the reputation. It was because nobody, like, when I interviewed at Colgan Air, Chuck Colgan Jr. said, he goes, if you're here in 3 years, you've done something horribly wrong. Like, I mean, they were abundantly clear in the air. We are here to get you as much flight time as possible and then get you out of here and get you to where you actually want to be. They were honest about it. And it was true. If you stayed there longer than about 3 or 4 years, unless it was because you were based in northern Maine, where there was no other, company flying up there pretty much was no reason to stay. You were going there to get 1,000 hours in a year, and then the next year become captain, get another 1,000 hours in a year, and 2.5 years later, you're a check airman and leaving, right? I mean, they're easier places to become check airmen. They're easier places to get into the training department. They're easier places to fly 800, 900 hours a year. They're easier places to get turbine PIC time because everybody's trying to leave.
So what are those airlines right now?
Oh, that's for our premium subscribers, Max.
Well, so that's actually a really interesting question, and it depends on where you live in the country, right? So I'll give you a really easy example. If you take a look at a company, and I'll just use Commuter, I'll use Mesa, I'll use GoJet, right? Because they're doing a lot of hiring. They were the first ones to really start pumping up their hiring. So when you have a company that's doing a lot of hiring, they're usually short-staffed, which means you're usually going to fly more, right? If you live in New York and you know you can get a basic Commuter or GoJet in New York, you can pick up additional trips really, really easy. But if you live in Seattle and you plan on commuting back to Seattle, those places may not be great for you. So you really have to think about, of the companies that are hiring, who's doing the most amount of hiring number one. And number two, where do you think you can more easily get to your base to pick up additional flying if you wanted to? Because that really is what the difference is. I mean, when I was at Colgan, for example, I was based in New York. I was living in Ohio, though. So thankfully, their normal job was abusive. I didn't have to pick up additional abuse if I didn't, I was pretty good as it was. But if I wanted to, it would have been hard commuting into New York to go do that.
I've always said, like, the best possible scenario is if you're a single person and you live in New York City. Like, that's like if you got family there or a way to live there reasonably, like, doesn't matter what airline or whatever. Pretty much every airline in New York is the junior base. It seems like you would have the best, like, quality of life.
Well, that's pretty much what I did. I lived in my parents' basement because they live in Jersey. Like, they literally the 5 minutes away from Newark Airport.
Yeah.
Hence the accent. But the other thing to consider too that a lot of folks leave off the table is you really should be looking at corporate aviation as well. If you can pick up for a 135 operator and you're literally single and you don't care if you go out 20, 25 days in a month and they're selling trips like crazy, you go to a Jetlinks that literally will fly you 23, 25 days a month if you want to, right? And book out serious flying time. I mean, you're getting a type rating, you're getting a lot of flying time. It's pretty good career advancement.
That's interesting. I did the upset recovery training a few months ago, and I was in it with a bunch of the people in the Southwest Destination 225. That's what it's called, right? And they're in that program, and that upset recovery training is part of their package. And they have like several different options after they complete their flight instructing commitment. And it's kind of like, then you can go to a regional, or I think you can do maybe cargo. You probably know better than I do, James. But one of the options was to go fly for ExoJet. Mm-hmm. And I told them, I'm like, hey guys, all things being equal, if I was you guys, I would do ExoJet, just because you'll be so much more diversified too. This was back in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm like, then if you go fly at ExoJet, you're going to have that 135 experience. And if you ever need to, find another flying job, if you do make it to Southwest and then get furloughed or whatever, like, then you've got that experience. And I imagine ExoJet, those other places you're flying probably just as much as at a regional, right?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'll give you a really good example, right? NetJets just dropped their minimums to 1,500 hours and an ATP written. Right. If you get hired by NetJets, their training program is a 121 N&O certified training program with AQP. I mean, a lot of these operators, when you go corporate, they have good training programs. Number one. Number two, if you get in and you decide, hey, and I separate 135 from 91. So when I'm saying corporate right now, I'm referring to 135 solely. Because a lot of times when folks go to 91 operators, when they get a really solid, good 91 operator, that's their equivalent of a legacy airline. They're not leaving, at least not voluntarily. But if you take a look at it and you say, hey, look, I want to go to a legacy airline, and you go to a 135 operator, or whether it's a mom and pop or a larger one, think about it from the legacy airlines perspective. If they hire you from a 135 operator, that's a net gain into their system. If they hire somebody from their regional flow, that's a net loss to their regional, right? They've got to find a way to replace that person. When they take you in from a 135 operator, that literally is a net gain into their system. They don't have to figure out a way to replace you. So a lot of people think like, if I go corporate, I'm hurting myself. Not really. I mean, they've got a boatload of corporate pilots that are at Southwest, that are at United, that are at Delta, that never touched anything 121 prior to going to those companies. So you really do have to think about, if I want to be home based, look at a FlexJet, look at a NetJets, look at an ExoJet, give them a chance. You're talking NetJets first year. If you fly their max schedule, their FO's pulling down 120, and I'm not talking like 2% of them. I mean, they have these, pay overrides that they do that work out to be substantial amounts of money. There are folks that go there and stay there and go, hey, I like it. You don't know until you go there and you try it out. You may find out that, you really like living in Montana or Wyoming, and that being home-based airline into work is kind of a pretty big deal for you. I mean, commuting from Billings to Newark sucks. like a lot, you know, and maybe the first couple of times you're really excited you're in the front end of a 7.6, but I don't know, after about the 56th trip to London, you kind of get over it.
Yep. Last question we got here is from a pilot says, I'm getting ready to interview at a major and I'm collecting letters of recommendation from guys that I know at the airline. Any tips on how to make these letters stand out?
Yeah, a couple different things with the letters of recommendation. So the first one is don't just solicit them from like captains and chief pilots. You want to give HR a 360-degree view of who you are. So you want to get letters of recommendation from people that you worked for directly. So it could be a captain, could be a chief pilot, could be an assistant chief pilot. But you also want to get letters of recommendation for people that worked for you, right? So those could be first officers, those could be flight attendants. Depending on if you're transitioned to the cockpit, it could be mechanics, right? But you want to show... from the people that you worked for, they're going to talk more about what you were like as an employee, how you were to manage. But the other people, the people that worked for you, right? They're going to talk about your leadership style. They're going to talk about your mentorship style. They're going to be able to show a vastly different perspective. Some of your best letters of recommendation are going to come from people you worked with that were struggling. Right? Maybe a student you had that was struggling, right? Maybe like I said, another pilot you were flying with that was struggling, either with learning the airplane or maybe they had something going on in their family at the time. So when you get the letters of recommendation, you really want to think about getting a 360-degree view of who you are, not just a top-down view. The other thing is these letters of recommendation, if somebody says, hey, write it for me, you need to go find somebody else to do it for you. Or meaning you need to find a different person to write your letter of recommendation. If you're writing your own letter of recommendation, it's probably not going to be good. And the person is probably not going to put a ton of effort and energy to make sure your resume gets to the top of the pile. It's not just about the letter. Is the person going to physically, like, politely irritate HR to call you? And I know that may sound crazy when you're talking about a legacy airline, but it works kind of the same at any carrier, right? You know, in terms of the more impactful the letter of recommendation, the more effective it's going to be. That letter has to talk in specifics about your soft skills, your emotional intelligence, right? Your social skills, your self-regulation, your ability to stay calm under pressure, your motivation, what gets you up in the morning, ability to empathize, right? See things from other people's perspective, your self-awareness. You want them to use specific stories, specific examples where you demonstrate those traits. Ideally, they're going to fit within the core values of the company, right? And they don't have to be cheesy about it, right? In terms of, hey, you know, they exhibit our core 75 or our, you know, Fab 15 or whatever it is that the value system is of that company, right? But you just take those 5 emotional intelligence skills: self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills, and have people use specific examples in those letters of recommendation. It makes you stand out. Hi, I'm writing to recommend Dylan. He is an amazing pilot. I really enjoyed flying with him. He's a great person. Is a horrible letter of recommendation.
I like to have a beer with him on a 4-day trip.
Yeah, but if I can write a letter of recommendation where I go, hey, look, you know, when the coronavirus was in full swing and everything was spinning out of control, Dylan was the guy that was on the phone with me talking through, hey, what are people thinking? What are they feeling? How do we put together an episode where we can get them useful information? How do we put in a mixture of things that are informative, but how do we keep the mood light enough, right? You know, I can talk about things like that, personal interactions, where when the person reads that, they get an idea, oh man, hey, this Dylan guy, he gets it, he cares. That's what you want. You want something where someone actually took the time to be thoughtful about who you are, not I'm writing to recommend Dylan for the position of first officer with, you know, Acme Airlines or Acme Corporate Company. And then they rip off what your qualifications are, all these titles. It doesn't matter. They need to talk about those soft skills.
Got it. It's good advice.
Oh, and by the way, always ask for more letters of recommendation than you need, because some of the people that I have the most respect for, that have been through the most things with me, are just horrible writers. They really are just horrible writers. And so if you want to hand in one letter of recommendation, you probably want to get like 3 or 4 so you can choose the best one, right? Ask for more letters than you need. And the other thing is you may want to use different letters for different companies because they tell a better story that fits with that company's personality or core values. So bottom line, always ask for more than you need.
All right. Last thing, James, you're like a clickbait master, I would say. I gotta, wait, did I say that right? A master clickbaiter. The emails that we're getting from Raven, I'm like, yeah, I'll read this later. And I always end up clicking and getting sucked in.
Next thing I know, I'm on the Points Guy website. I don't know how I got there.
Yeah.
It's really exactly. Weird.
But what's cool is I like that you have a topic, you click on it, and then you have like 4 bullet points for it. So you can quickly skim what's going on, and then you can dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes you have misleading headlines. I'm just going to accuse you of it right now. Yeah.
No.
But overall, though, it is helping me stay on top of what's going on. I mean, I didn't know anything about the NetJets hiring or some of the numbers that Delta's doing, but you just put it out there right in the front of the email. So I really like that. How can folks, if they don't have that come into their inbox, how can they get that?
Sure. Go to ravencareers.com. In the top right, you're going to see industry updates. Click on that link, add in your email, and you're on the list. Look, the goal is every week, because it comes out every Tuesday, we are trying to give you the bottom line up front of what you need to know about what's going on in the industry so you can make career decisions for yourself informed. Now, yes, right? Sometimes we are hiding the peas in the mashed potatoes. Every article that we put in there is useful. Every article is hitting some segment of the industry that is going to impact your ability to make a decision. And sometimes it's hard to get people to read things that they need to read. So do I try and get creative with the titles? Yes, obviously. But the core goal, the core underlying purpose of the emails is to eliminate fluff, right? It's usually about 3 to 5 articles of just interesting things that are going on in the industry that give you kind of awareness. At the top, there's always 3 to 4 bullets of exactly what's going on with the hiring. So that especially because there's so much information changing on a weekly basis. I write the email as if it's for me, to be honest, right? Like, what would I want to know? What would I need to know to just help me kind of keep informed and continue to have conversations at home with my family to make sure I'm making the right career decisions for myself. And then there's a nice mixture of stats in there. Like I said, TSA numbers. We're always trying to kind of find pretty solid data that you can use to figure out about what's going on. But they come out every Tuesday. We get a huge amount of positive feedback about them. Yes, every once in a while somebody gets upset because there's something, that their airline's not doing that's great. Like, I think somebody's airline this week had a massive catastrophic failure when it came to some type of system. Was it reservations, ticketing? I think everything. But at the end of the day, we're actually really not pro or against any specific company. It's about getting you the information about each segment of the industry and what's going on at all these different companies. So you make a choice of what's right for you. At the end of the day, we want you at the company you're happiest at. That's all I care about.
And that's it for Industry Update with James Onieal, everybody. You can scoot back from the edge of your seat. It has come to a close. Thanks again, James. Always appreciated.
Rock on.
All right, for story time today, we have a special guest. I've subbed out Max and brought in my wife and his sister.
That's me.
So that'd be funny to tell the story of how we kind of came to get to know each other, because it is kind of aviation related and it's kind of ironic deal. So I was a young new hire at American Eagle, and my buddy and I, shout out to Chad, decided we were going to go to this concert in South Carolina one time in Myrtle Beach. And I was in training. I think he was flying for Mesa or something. And we're brand new to the regional airlines. And like the coolest thing about being a regional airline pilot is the jump seat privileges and being able to go wherever you want for free.
Especially when you're 24.
Right. Exactly. Because you can't really pay for anything else. So let's go to Myrtle Beach. It'll be awesome. We're going to go see one of our favorite bands, OAR. And so we make the plan to go, and I had to connect. I was coming from Dallas, and I think I had to go to like Atlanta or something to connect. And I remember actually, I should back up. Before that, I had texted you because I knew you lived in South Carolina also.
Yeah, we'd only met like in person one time, I think, through Max.
Right. And I just texted you, and I was like, hey, my buddy and I are going to this concert, OAR. I think maybe I knew you liked them or something. And I was like, do you want to go? I knew you were in Charleston.
Yeah, it's just a couple hours from Myrtle Beach.
And I didn't know. I'm like, it's in South Carolina. You know, it must all be close. So, anyways, you agreed. You're like, yeah, sure, I'll go.
Well, it was, and I think it just so happened that it was like the day after my last final for the semester, so it was perfect timing to want to get out and do something fun.
Yeah. So I said, great. Okay, meet Chad. Chad and I are going to go to Myrtle Beach. We're going to fly in. We'll meet you there. So I'm in Atlanta. I'm getting ready to board the flight to Myrtle Beach, and I've already got the ticket in hand and everything. I'm like getting ready to walk down the jet bridge, and the gate agent's like, sorry, Delta pilot needs that jump seat, and they like took the card away from me.
I almost don't really remember that this happened, but I barely knew you. So
it was like pretty early in the morning, I remember, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And like the next flight to Myrtle Beach, I was going to miss the concert. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, there's a flight to Charleston. I could fly to Charleston and then maybe ride with you up to the concert. So I like ran over at the last second. I remember getting on this flight to Charleston, and then I think cell phones existed then.
Yeah, you had a flip phone. I remember it. And you even had Google Maps on it. I'd never heard of anything like that before. But of course you did. You know all the technology.
So I got to Charleston. You and your friend picked me up. I remember sitting in the back of your little Toyota, and we drove up to Myrtle Beach to enjoy the concert. And I just remember we just had a really fun time getting to know each other on the drive, the three of us. And I feel like we just kind of hit it off right from there. But
yeah, for sure. That's 15 years ago at this point.
I know.
Now it's crazy. But yeah, we had so much fun. It was very random. I'd never met Chad before. You'd never met Leah, and we'd only met each other once. So
yeah, and we
kind of an odd, grouping of people, but it was so fun.
Yeah, and it was just, I mean, what a divine intervention to get me off that jump seat of that other plane onto the other one. I hop in the car with you. We drive up there and get to spend a few hours in the car, and it just seemed like that was kind of set the table for. And
then you ended up coming back to Charleston with us. You stayed another night there, and then flew out of Charleston to head back to wherever you were going.
Dallas, wherever. That's the first time that I learned Charleston is one of the hardest places to commute in and out of.
It should be. I think it's better now. I think Southwest goes in there, so I don't know. It was particularly tough back then.
And then after that, I remember I was based in Los Angeles. You were in Charleston, and then we started dating. And that was...
I don't think I was ever fully able to appreciate how hard that was for you to travel across the entire country, having to connect in all these different places on the jump seat, and it was like at least once a month, and you were just exhausted. And I don't think I really appreciated that. So thank you.
I remember I always had to sit on the 757 in Delta where there's the jump seat. A 757 should have two jump seats in it, and there's one really nice jump seat in the 757, and the second one's not that great because it's behind the captain and it sits up high like a stool, but there's nowhere to rest your feet. It is the most uncomfortable jump seat, one of them in the industry, and that was the one I usually had to sit in. And I just remember going over there, and I'm like, I do like this girl, though. It might be worth it.
Yeah, you flew through the night on FedEx before. Mm-hmm. Lots of adventure.
Hey, pick me up at the airport at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm coming for a visit.
Whatever it took.
Yeah. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I guess the airlines brought us together.
They sure did. I mean, I was out in South Carolina finishing up pharmacy school, and I had never really met you except once in passing while you were going home through Phoenix for Christmas, and I had just gotten there. And so, yeah, it's an aviation love story.
Yeah. Well, there's no bigger proponent of aviation than you.
Well, we've had our ups and downs since we got married. It's a tough road, especially for young married people, I think, until you really catch your groove. But that's for another time.
Yeah, I think we'll have to you have any advice for any young ladies that are possibly dating airmen?
I think, and I fell into this trap too, but it seems so cool in your early 20s. Like, oh, he's a pilot. And I don't know, like, I literally don't know why that seems like so sexy. Like, he's an accountant, he's a pilot, like whatever. but back then it seems so cool. And so I get that, but it's not an easy life. It's not easy at all. It involves a lot of sacrifice, and you have to learn to, I guess, kind of compromise a lot of things that you wouldn't have to. And, if you married someone that worked 9 to 5, but it has its payoffs too. So I think
like standby travel, which is one of your personal favorites.
No, I've had the worst luck, and I'll never do it again, which is fine because probably won't be an opportunity for me to. But yeah, it's just, it's a tough road. So just know that, but it can be worth it.
That is just a resounding endorsement. I think it might be worth it.
I like being honest. It's been worth it for me. I can see why it might not always be for everyone, but that's the real deal.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
All right. You've done it again. Wasted a perfectly good hour listening to the 21.5 podcast. It's the show for the professional pilots. I'd like to say thank you to our friends at Harvey Watt.
And of course, Advanced Aircrew Academy.
And most importantly, all of our listeners. Thank you for all the support. Thanks for buying the coffee cups, sending in your emails, reviews.
And thank you for downloading and listening to the show.
And thank you for putting up with another hour of James. I mean, I guess we should thank James too for of course, for coming on. Thank you, Mr. Onieal.
James' time is valuable these days.
It is. It's very difficult to get on the schedule.
Things are rolling, but we always appreciate him taking some time out of his day to help break it down for us.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to maybe do one more show and then go on vacation. Probably. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, Max, that I forgot. There is a new app called Green Room. Okay. You might have seen these apps called like Clubhouse and Stereo. Anyways, it's really cool, but it basically allows you to do like a live discussion and everybody can join. So you can have like a couple hosts and then everybody can join it and discuss. So we're going to start playing around with doing a live deal. I don't know if you're going to participate.
We'll check my schedule.
We'll see. But I think it'd be fun to be able to get some folks on there. We can have live questions. You can like have people in the audience and then select them to speak and stuff. So it should be pretty fun. We'll mostly be focusing on discussing memes. So I think you'll be there. But your homework is to go download the Green Room app. And then we'll make an announcement when we're going to actually do a show. And then you'll be ready.
All right. Well, until then,
just remember,
flexibility.
It's the key to air power.
Run, God.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.